wish to Google for Stellarium. Easy, right? Yeah. The page is actually stellarium.org. That's what it looks like. Slightly outdated, if you ask me. But very easy. You see here, if you have Windows, if you have a Mac, or if you are one of the few people in the world that use Linux, you can download it immediately here. That's very easy to do. And you just click on it, and it downloads a file, and you run it, and that's basically it. There's a lot more on this website that you can engage with. I mean, this section here, get involved, where you have all sorts of extra plugins, some of which we're going to talk about, like extra landscapes that you can download, already created by other users, scripts, plugins, etc. There's also documentation, user guides if you want to learn about, they're relatively user-friendly. Anything else you would add here?
I think usually by 99% of the cases that will not be a problem for you to install and run. I have seen it in many cases though that it runs and then gives you some garbled responses or does something weird graphic-wise. Then there is, again, you can see you can download older versions. Then my tip is always remove the newest version and just go to the last one, then the one before, until you go down to a more basic Stellarium which will run.
But
by all means,
that's very rare. Yeah.
That's very rare, but that's a thing where they're all there. You can go back virtually to the very first version and be shocked at how rudimental it looks compared to the very snazzy new good versions.
The other thing to bear in mind is that Stellarium is actively being developed. It's not like Office, which comes out every X years. There's a new version almost every month. Sometimes there's more than one version on a month. And sometimes the changes are very, very minor. Sometimes they are quite significant. So every so often, once you start using it, every so often, go back to the website and download the new version. But when you do, and when you install it, and you click on the Stellarium icon, this is what it looks like. You open it and it looks like this. And you can then...
Does it in the window?
Sorry? Yeah.
It goes straight to feed screen, full screen. No?
I think the new version doesn't.
Ah, okay, good.
Did it go straight to full screen, Benedict?
Yeah.
It did?
Okay. I just keep it in a window so I can get
just get it on.
That one.
Yeah.
So when you click on it, it basically opens like this. It occupies your entire screen. And so the trick, maybe the first trick to learn is this button here. Well, the first trick to learn is actually, let's look at this user interface. What you're seeing is a landscape that was pre-selected for you, with a view that was pre-selected for you, or well, it's due south here. I don't think this is a default landscape, is it?
Yeah.
It's a touch screen, so
you can move it around.
Oh, the big arching. Yeah.
Okay. This actually has the issue that, where is Eva? There you are. This is the problem you mentioned to me yesterday, isn't it? With the high definition screens.
Yeah, but why is it small? Is it super small?
Because this is incredibly pixelated, and it's usually not like that.
That will, yeah, that's...
No, it's not the problem I was talking about. The problem I was talking about is the writing at the bottom. Which becomes super small, you can barely read it. It's totally compressed. And I was just going to say, it's not a problem there, but it is on my screen.
Okay, that's usually the default landscape anyway.
So there's a few things you can now do. For one, to maneuver around, you can see already, just drag around the landscape. It will show you the appropriate view. You can zoom out and zoom in again, either with the scroll button of your mouse or page up, page down, using the keyboard. And then what you'll also notice the cardinal points indicated, and you've got seemingly one menu bar at the bottom. If you move the mouse to the bottom, you'll see that expands into a whole selection of stuff, but also if you move the mouse to the bottom left, you've got a large variety. So if you move to the bottom, probably some interesting parts to see is the intuitive, obvious ones of rewind, play, current location, fast forward, and exit.
Switch off.
So that's, you don't have to go in and always kill it. You can usually switch it off normally. So this is where you can press fast forward once, and you can see the time then increases, and you can press it again.
So each time you press it, time moves faster. It's not like on a VHS, a VCR, where you have to press it for it to move. You press once, and time starts to move faster at I think twice the speed.
Yeah.
Then you press it again, it moves at 4 times the usual speed. And as you can see, the sun is setting, and the stars have begun to show up.
So if you press play, it will now not stop, but it will play it at real time. So you can see the time tick.
1 second per second.
Again,
then it pauses.
Then it pauses. At the moment, it's not important, but if you, for example, zoom in to want to see something, you don't want it to drift out of the field of view, as it will do as the stars rise and set. So that's
and if you want to go back to the current time, you then press this button here, and we're back at the time right now.
One thing that you can then further explore are these options here. We might exclude these until we...
For now,
and just focus on these parts. These are the viewing. The one in the middle is the obvious one, on-off for the west, north, south, east directions. This one is quite beautiful. You can remove all atmosphere, and you can essentially see what's in the sky without having the nuisance of brightened background around. So now, what you would do if you click on that, you would see all the stars. Because the stars are there, they're just not visible because they're drowned out by the atmospheric scattering of the light. So that's quite beautiful. It's also quite beautiful in night time. If you set it up, that gives you sometimes a bit more crisper view what's there.
So I'm just going to go back in time just to show you that the sun is there. This is the sun. But because we switched off the atmosphere, you see the sun is there. But you switch off the atmosphere, you can see what you would see if there was no atmosphere on the planet. So you can see the constellations even during the daytime. And this is quite useful if you are looking for a target of an alignment, for instance, as we will cover at some point in the next hour. Carry on.
So if you move down, you've got on the left-hand side 3 options that essentially all are around constellations. So from left to right, you've either got the line sketches of the outlines of the dot-to-dot connections for your constellations.
Hold on.
Yeah, there you are. So we recognise the asterism of the plough as part of Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, and our favourite Draco upside down. So you've got that part. If you go to the next one, it will then be able to label them appropriately. And the next one is the beautiful one. If you click on that, you will now so you can bring up the artwork as well. As a side, if you're really into it, you can manipulate all of that. You can recreate your own artwork and upload that as well.
That's true.
We won't talk about that. But that's where you can show the kind of constellations that are there.
And then, of course, this also plays.
Yeah.
There we
the
go.
Planets, let that revolve a little bit more so we can show the zooming in now in context with planets. Yeah, just say it's play. That's okay. Stop it. Rewind.
To when?
Let's rewind till we get to say midnight. Yeah. So if you look towards south, we'll be able to see. If you click on Saturn, so one thing you can now do is you can zoom in. If you zoom in a little bit, try to, This is the point where we want to zoom into Saturn. It's a pain because you zoom in, you have to recenter, zoom in, recenter. A little trick, click on Saturn, press the space bar, or I think there's a nice icon which I always forget. And that centers that now always in your field of view while you're zooming. Now as you zoom in, 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 and you press it. So you can actually explore the night sky in far more detail than you might want to. So you can explore nebulas as well in there and things like that. So if you zoom out, zoom out, zoom out, there's the full. If you click on the moon, we can do the same thing.
Spacebar.
Spacebar and zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. And unsurprisingly, we just off yesterday we had the full moon. So this is just a bit of a waning of the strawberry full moon that you see in here as well.
Can we use those images in, like, are these copyrighted? I mean, if you take a picture or you say something, you have to put Stellarium or what?
It's freeware.
It's freeware, yeah. But it's good practice to just mention that, you know.
Them, yes. So it's not
recognize
like it's copyright, so then you have to pay a fee.
So just recognize that it's a Stellarium.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you know it's so cool that you can post it in Facebook or things like that. You know?
Yeah, just don't pretend it was a photo you took.
Yeah. Well, we won't elaborate on the spoofs from Astronomy picture of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so that's that aspect. I think what might be now quite interesting to move to the left-hand side and see, you've seen that it's sometimes a bit of a mare to get to the time that you want it to be. So if you move to the left, you've got loads of one. I just pick out the date and time window. At that point, if you open that, you've now got a really good control of the time. You can click through minutes, hours, and years, including adding a minus in front and going BC as well. So that is there. So at that point, you can now set it to any time as you want to.
So we're now looking at the sky in 2000 BC.
Yeah, put it in spring equinox.
Can we talk about that later? Because there is a slight complication with that sort of thing in Stellarium. We'll get to that.
That's one thing. The other part is that might be interesting if you move to the left again. Let's see if I can. If you bring the icon just below sky viewing options, which is probably the one that you might want to fiddle around with most, because it allows you now to take on a fairly easygoing level control of lots of things. For one, Fabio has, I think it might be pre-selected, the landscape one. It might be that's the typical tab at the top that's brought up, and there on the left-hand side you've got a mass of locations. This is far more extensive than that what would be normally on there. Things like Stonehenge or so won't be on there, but Jupiter, Mars, Moon, and things there on there.
This is my copy of Stellarium.
Yeah. So you can bring up any of these landscapes. Now, if you're thinking, wow, how do I find them or locate them? Fabio mentioned where you can get onto the website where they have loads of landscapes that you can download as a zip file. What you can now do, if you bring up that big window.
Hold on.
What's that horrible church?
It's not inside the Abbey. It's outside.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. That's a shame.
Yeah.
Sorry.
If you drag that back in, you can see if you have downloaded now a landscape of your site or something that you might want to look at, add and remove landscape. If you click on that, it will then allow you to install a new landscape from a zip file. That's all it is. It brings up a dialog window, you locate your file, open it, boom, it will be in there. You don't have to do anything else. Download the zip file, which is somewhere on a web page. That's got everything in there.
On the Stellarium webpage, I've shown you that landscapes button. You just click there and you download that.
Oh, but everybody has access then?
Yes.
Okay.
And people that do work, I've got my homepage that's got dozens of landscapes on there as well. So you can even Google Stellarium landscapes as well and see how it is. One word of warning I had with my students as well, you said that some browsers love to download the zip file and unpack it for you immediately into a normal folder. Never do that. Try to stop it or re-zip it. Always make sure it only saves that zipped file, because Stellarium, as this is set up, lives and dies with the zip file.
Yep.
If you had enough of it, you can always remove it again and start afresh. Other things to maybe mention, might be interesting if you go to markings, is an interesting one where you can, for example, switch on different frames of reference and meridian, the ecliptic as well. You can switch on certain kind of bands that might be relevant for your work.
So hold on.
As well.
I just switched off the constellation art so we can see the sky better.
Yeah.
And I'm now going to add the, where is it? The ecliptic of date. That is the ecliptic, that is the path the sun takes throughout the year at this particular point in time, moment in time. And you can see it there, that's this line here.
Unsurprisingly, it's not on that line, are we? Why is it not on that line?
Nice
You got
catch.
equator.
Sorry, that's the
You flipped
equator.
it.
I clicked on the wrong
There,
thing. Exactly. There we go.
Well, good, you had it on the equator. Surprisingly, it's not on the equator because it's as far north.
Yeah, so you can have the equator as well, as we just learned. Blue and red, different colors. You can have other things as well. But star law.
Star law.
This is very interesting, I think. But even though it's flawed at points, and I'm going to pick the one that Bernadette, I'm sure, will think it's most flawed. But you can change the constellations. We're looking at modern constellations here, with the lines and the names and the art that we know them by. But there's a whole host, and you can download more, other cultures, star law. So, for instance, you could do the Inuit, and you see that here, okay, let's go back. What was that star? That's Procyon, that's Sirius there, that's Betelgeuse, just so we have a few. In our view, we can now click there and we see, according to the Inuit, Procyon is name of a murdered man, Sirius is called the Flickering One, or something along those lines, etc. So you get a feel for a different culture's skyscape. This
should be taken with a large grain of salt.
Yes, that's.
It should not be a major reference or primary source for any NA paper.
I was going to get there, but at the same time, here, when you click on them, you have this information here, which usually, but not always, has a discussion of the sources of where this information was retrieved from. So, for instance, here for the Inuit, this sky culture was contributed by blah blah, based primarily on the book The Arctic Sky, Inuit Astronomy, Star Law and Legend by John MacDonald, which is a book I actually recommend.
So what you do, just add it, you should go to that source.
Yeah.
You go to that reference, work with that, and then come back to that. That should justify and point his book.
Yes,
I think
exactly.
all this illustrates is quite nicely that there is more than what is displayed, but I mean, you're familiar with that, and that's something that I use for my astronomy students, and they're then wowed by that idea that there are not only these constellations, there are other constellations that work on the same context of stars, but just make other shapes.
So, for instance, I just clicked on the Egyptian one, and you'll see here our modern constellation of Orion, Orion's belt here, but you see here this reconstruction of the Egyptian constellation of Sa, where our Orion is but the upper part of this character. I'm not sure how you feel about this reconstruction, Bernadette, but you say nothing. Your silence says more than...
I think some parts are quite
Yes, exactly, yeah.
There's debatable parts of the Egyptian sky.
But again, it says here, it's based on the paper, A Map of the Ancient Egyptian Firmament by Juan
I
Antonio
think if we
Belmonte.
step back, what it best illustrates is how much you can alter in Stellarium. So as I've demonstrated, you can put in a building that's of relevance and create that as your new defined constellation while you're exploring the skyscape as you're perceiving. So I think that's the best way of seeing it as something where you can use Stellarium to achieve the maximum kind of impact that you want to have.
Another thing I'm very fond of playing, particularly more recently, is, so here in the same, what was this called, sky and viewing options, you also have this sky tab here, where you can increase the Milky Way brightness. It's so bright and purple that, so here you have Milky Way brightness, which I find that it helps to increase it up a bit, just because we often ignore it, and it's right there, and in a dark sky it would look more or less like that. That's actually not too bad, I think. And it just makes it so obvious that then you start playing with it, and you see that it does fantastic things, and it looks just gorgeous.
One thing is important to maybe raise as well, if you've got it somewhere at night time, if you switch back on the atmosphere,
yeah, there we go.
and then move on to the sky viewing option,
Oh, sorry, yeah.
you also have control of the light pollution. If you vary that, have a look at how many of the stars appear or disappear. Yeah, you could just see, bring that down again. There's the Andromeda Nebula, and if you take that down, it just disappears. Yes, you can set it to the lowest value, but you still have some atmosphere in there. That's why sometimes I mention you want the clarity, get rid of the atmosphere, and you can see all the stars and constellations that are visible nice and clear. I think these are some of the key things before we can go into some of the coordinate grids and allow you to explore the movement of Stellarium to understand some of the aspects Fabio was talking about beforehand.
Just one other thing. Yeah. We've discussed date and time, and that's the window, but there's another important, which is the location window.
Yeah, yeah.
Because of course, you're going to see different things depending on where you are on the planet. And they've made this very, very easy. If you have the latitude and longitude of your site, much like what we discussed for those of you who were here earlier for the skills session, you can just put it in. But they have a database, which is not bad, of cities. And you can just type Bath, and there it is, Bath, United Kingdom. You click on it twice, and the sky that you will see is the sky of Bath. But the landscape you see is whatever landscape you put in, right? It doesn't have panoramas for every single city in the world. But you now have the sky today, not today, strangely, but anyway, there it is. That's the sky as you would see it right now, well, with lots of extra information in it. But yeah, so the sun is still high. Does that make sense? Any questions at this stage? Yes.
There's a few questions. I just want to add something else to it.
I was going to say, I go to the southern hemisphere sometimes before, and I find that very complicated because everything's back upside down.
Yeah.
And you probably understand that immediately, but I find that really difficult. And everything is back to front and the sun is south.
So one of the things you can do is you can go there on this particular ice.
Yes.
Exactly.
What I wanted to just add before you went into the more technical things, if you could give us a night sky, please, with an ecliptic on, like today, just like 10 o'clock tonight or something like that.
Okay.
Just give me some
Probably have to press play.
and put an ecliptic on, and let's have a good visibility.
Put an ecliptic on.
Yeah.
Get rid of the atmosphere, maybe.
And yeah, okay. And can you put the constellation images up? Just okay. I mean, these images are horrible, but as Dan said, you can put your own in. But can we zoom out a little bit, just so we've got Libra? Okay, just there. We can see here. This is the night sky. We've got currently. This is Jupiter just having passed Regulus. We've got Mars in Libra. We've got Saturn just above that poor Scorpion in that image. And we've got that sort of combination. And indeed, the Moon, if we move around a little bit on the ecliptic, is right in the face of Capricorn, just there, setting. Now, one of the uses of this is that you could be reading the letters from the Assyrian kings, right? And they're describing something. You can go back to try and guess the timing, 600 BC, 750 BC. You can play, as Fabio and Dan have been showing you. And you can actually crank it along until the moon gets into the face of the goat that's being described in the cuneiform text. You can look for Jupiter or Mars entering into the Scorpion, because the Babylonian constellations are very, very similar to what we're seeing here. Leo was probably a bit bigger, sort of, but pretty well they're there. That's what they're writing about. So the foundation material of astrology, which is in the cuneiform text, which is describing visually how the planets are sitting amongst the constellations, you can recreate here in Stellarium. And that's something important if you're writing a history paper and something like that. You could tinker, possibly find it, create an image, put it in your paper, citing Stellarium. History again, the foundation chart for Baghdad, the city of Baghdad.
Yeah.
Go and put it up. Have a look at it in the sky. Go and stand on that plane, even if you can't get a Baghdad landscape, but just get a nice flat landscape. Look at it. And go through the sunset, the dawn, roll it through, looking at what they were looking at, being aware of the horoscope. If they're seeing it in terms of visual astrology, you'll have difference between the tropical degree of the planet versus its constellational position, because you're all aware of the difference between the two. But just, you can actually, any historical chart, one of the first horoscope, things will be good for him. Try and find it. It's about 410 BC. Try and find it. Get an image of the sky. Engage with the sky with an astrologer's eye as well as a cultural astronomer's eye. So you can, one of the reasons that I wanted you to get involved with Stellarium is that almost anything that you do within the MA, you could, if there's a date, if there's a concept, you can actually, as one of a supplementary line of thinking for you, you can go into Stellarium. And indeed, some people have done a great deal of work in dating a lot of the astronomical diaries of Assyria, using planetariums like this to crank it back and find the combination. So be aware of that before we get into the more technical stuff. And that's all you need. You've seen enough now to know how to do that, to crank that back. Yeah.
So, Bernadette, was just as easy as changing the time and date?
Yes, it is. It's changing the time and date.
Location.
And location, yes, thank you. Good tip. Location, the location, as Fabio showed you, and changing the date. Just and changing the date, the year, and then you can animate. And you can watch the planets move as you're animating. If you go back, for example, to the time window, please, Fabio. So if you animate the years, if Fabio just goes back or forth a year, you see you've still got night. You see the planets rolling around?
Mm-hmm.
See them moving?
Yeah.
See? So you can scan.
Look at Jupiter here.
Yeah, I know that.
Every year.
Wondering about, let's say we go back to the Babylonian time. Will this software know how to deal with
The
time?
perception.
Yes.
So minus
That's been
700,
corrected.
please.
There was
Fabio.
2 years ago some
Minus
minor
700.
issues that's been corrected.
There we are.
So
So
Some
now,
issues regarding the
that-
ecliptic as well
that's-
that you've got to change in the.
Alina, that's a
ecliptic
Babylonian
and all that.
sky now. That's minus 700 BC.
Well,
There is
in Bath.
in that. Yeah, you have obviously.
That's the
yeah.
Babylonian, yeah.
So that's what I wanted to point out to you, so that it's not just about for skyscape students. It's for about heavenly discourse students. It's for about history students.
Yeah.
It's for almost. It's for RCC students.
Even for astrologers, if they want to if they want to give the picture of the sky when the person was born.
Well, this is called visual astrology, which is
Visual astrology.
what Darren and I spent.
Okay, I'm interested. Can we check like zero, the
Thanks,
year
Fabio.
zero?
I just wanted to show one thing regarding movements, because you were elaborating on that. So what you can do, for example, fast forward time. Let's get rid of the atmosphere. And you can see Saturn.
See them there.
There they are.
Where's the thing?
To an extent, if you get the right time, you can get the nice.
And that's a narrative happening in the Babylonian sense. What you're seeing, those planets moving, coming together, pulling apart, that's a sky narrative.
You can just now see the movement
And
that it's doing.
jumping.
And indeed, this, what you're looking at, and if you describe this as a
Stopping.
narrative, you're looking at the foundations of astrology, the very beginning of
Yeah,
astrology,
of course.
describing that narrative. And the fact that Mercury's done this,
this,
and that Jupiter, the crown prince, was running away from the king. Each one of these are characters on a Shakespearean
constellation and
stage.
try to find
Well,
where
actually,
the sun
sounded like you
enters in
had
the Piscean
You
era.
can. The problem is, where is that boundary, right?
Well,
You can use the modern boundary. You can use the modern boundary. No, the geographical boundary of the constellation.
Well, if you look at all the stars, you know the Piscean, we can see more or less.
But yes, you can definitely do that.
Should we just continue with the coordinates?
I just want to ask, can you get away from that text you have up in the
Yes.
left-hand corner?
How do you?
Right click.
That was
You right click.
Yeah. Anyway, that's only because Dan clicked on that star, so that, and then click on spacebar, so that the screen is fixed
Yes.
around that star.
Yeah.
So could I ask about the
Yeah.
landscapes and the location? I was looking at the website and there's a very limited number of landscapes that use clues are made or something. How would I, if I want a specific landscape, if I really wanted to study, how would I go about that?
We should leave that to the end of the session. That is easy if you know what you're doing. For the first time, it can be quite challenging, but it's again something that I like. That is easy enough to do it without paying a single penny for any specific software to import it. If you know what you're doing, we were on site. It took us 15 minutes to gather the images on last week Tuesday. I came back from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. I had the landscape working, and at 10 p.m. you guys had it on your computers to work with for the rest of the project. So 2 hours is what it might take to stitch it together.
But
if
so,
you know,
just to be clear, he's talking about creating a landscape from scratch.
That's what, yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah.
some of the ones I want, there's no Irish landscapes at all there, so I'd have to make them all myself, but I'm looking for things to idea. And I'd say my second question is probably something that should cover later. If I create it and put it in, how do I make sure it's turned the right way? You know,
because that is when you're creating it, that's one
Yeah.
key part to ensure the stretching, the altitude of the horizon is right and the orientation is right as well.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Is this the sort of thing we're going to be able to do on a planetarium next week?
Yeah.
Excellent.
You can make everyone sick by doing that and spinning it around.
Spinning it around.
Because actually, this is where I love this software, and my students will know that they've worked with this already to a certain extent to have experienced this. And let's switch on all the usual stuff. So we're back again. There's our horizon. Let's set that to something. Where do we have that? Why is it doing this now? There we are. There's our landscape. At the bottom, if I move down now, you'll see that if I remove some of these, we get these two grids. So I can now put on an azimuthal grid, i.e. the grid that you're referring to when you're measuring azimuths and altitudes above a perfect mathematical horizon. That is this one. And you can now see...
Can you remove the ecliptic? Yes. Just to be easy. Yes.
There we are. So you can see at the top, if I zoom in a little bit, you'll see better. 180 degrees due south, things you were measuring as well when we were dealing with azimuths.
Yeah.
And you can see here that's 10 degrees height, 20 degrees. You can see Mars at the moment is 28, 29 degrees altitude. If I click on Mars, you can see that being represented here as well as 29 degrees altitude at the moment. So that's the grid. Bear in mind, these are all projections. It's trying to recreate a sphere that you're within on a flat screen, which always fails in any formal manner. So seeing this in a full immersive planetarium is always helpful. Or take your time, lie on the back of the ground and see the sky above you.
Yeah, but
why not do it now?
Can I ask a question?
That is what you're seeing now. So you can see you're looking zenith there, altitude 180 degrees and around. Why is this interesting? Because let me remove, sorry Tori, remind me. So if I come back, there are your stars. So what I'll do now is I'll start the animation. You will now see the things that Fabio was referring to when the stars rise and set. Let's see the motions. Ignore the sun and things like that whizzing through. So for one, you will notice all things rotate around this star, the pole star. If I fast forward that a bit more, you'll see how things rise and set, that they don't just drop down below the horizon. What I'll now do is I'll remove this grid. We talked about declinations of the actual absolute reference frame to say this star has this declination. At the moment, Capella or Arcturus, they have altitudes and azimuths that are constantly changing. Let's switch on this equatorial grid, the blue one. Notice...
Can you put it a bit slower?
Notice Sirius. Within that grid, it stays stationary. The grid rotates. But that means if I, for example, know that Sirius sets over here, because that then is that azimuth that I might have measured, I can infer that declination. And that's the same declination that Sirius has all the time. Therefore, turning the azimuth via latitude and altitude into declination tells you what star will be there, because that star has always the same declination as we're moving through time. Ignore all the deeper kind of, if you're going through millennia, but by all means, that is how we're seeing it. It's always the same declination.
So let's just have a quick actual example of this, of how one would go about having calculated the declination as we did in the afternoon.
Can I, before that point comes in, there was the angle of the equator varies with your position. If you find that difficult to understand, I can understand that because it's trigonometry, spherical trigonometry explained on the flat board, never works. Let's have a look. So, let's zoom in. There's our celestial equator. I'll bring it up and highlight it. Equator date, there we are. Now that's a fat blue line. Might even take away the grid. Are you familiar? There's your equator. Bring up your location window. There we are at the top. I'll sneak it down here. And I'll take you on a trip from, there we are, the UK. That's the celestial equator. And I'll take you further south. What will happen to the equator the further south I will go now? Why? Well, let's have a sneaky peek what happens if I bring up that grid and zoom out again. We're lying on our back again. If you're lying on the equator, North and South Pole are there. That's where everything is revolving around, and the equator is above your head. That's what you're seeing. So now I can actually use that nice view, if you got your head around that, and walk you back over the equator, through the Sahara, into there, England, over the sea, due north, until we get to the North Pole, where the pole star is above, where you're lying on the axis of the Earth as it rotates, and the equator is the horizon line. You can use that to also place yourself into the southern hemisphere and face all the horrible upside down constellations and that perception as well. But that gives you the kind of idea of how that varies with the location, experiencing it here, which is, I think, key. And I know my guys from the from my first year course do the same thing to get their head around spherical geometry without using trigonometry. Because think about also the kind of aspects of star phases that Bernadette talks about as well, that elaborates further on the idea of circumpolar stars. This shows you quite nicely that there is this circle of stars that never rise or set, stars that rise and set, stars that never are visible, and stars that then can mimic the kind of circumpolar behavior which you can explore. But I think this sets the scene now beautifully to actually elaborate on turning as you move into declinations and seeing that.
Well, not so much turning as into declinations, but making sense of declinations, I suppose. So
well, you can do something, get a nice profile where you get a barn or so, and you can see it setting behind the barn, and then you just switch to ocean, and you see nicely. But just visualizing that kind of effect here works nicely.
Let me get rid of the equator for now. So let's say that we were, yes, let's go back to Bath actually. Let's basically carry on from the skill session for those who were here. I clicked on the wrong thing. So if I put Bath, what? Okay, that's weird. It was there a minute ago. How did that happen? So let's say we're here, we measured the obelisk outside, for those of you who weren't here, we've done that, and we obtained 11 degrees of declination was one of the orientations of the base of the obelisk. So we can now try to look for 11 degrees declination. What's the rising point? That was towards the eastern horizon. To see which stars rise in alignment with this edge of the obelisk. And the way I tend to do that is I put up the equatorial grid. There it is. And I look for 11 degrees, more or less. And Stellarium makes this easy because I think, as Dan mentioned, each one of these lines in the grid is 10 degrees. So that's the celestial equator. You can see there 0 degrees. That's 10. So we know we need to look for something that is 11. That's just slightly north of this line. So somewhere here. Okay? And we're looking for, well, this isn't a particularly flat horizon, but it's more or less flat. Well, it's flat here, but it's not 0. But let's look at this bit of the horizon. This is where a star would rise in alignment with the obelisk. So let's focus on this part of the landscape while I fast forward. Maybe. Okay, something happened there. Let me go back. I actually prefer to have control over this by just changing time there. So we're looking at this position in the line. Can you? Yeah, I'll do that. Right? Focus your eyes there, and I'm going to move time forward. Oops. So nothing of interest has risen here. The moon rose very close today. Aldebaran rose a few degrees further north. Betelgeuse a few degrees further south. Regulus.
Oh.
Okay.
Regulus and obelisk.
You can then click on it, and you get the actual declination. There's RA dec on date, so you want declination. There it is, 11:53. Okay. You can continue to do that. See if anything else appears. And in this particular case, nothing else is closer to this particular valid declination. Okay. We've just identified a possible target for an alignment there. Of course, then the next question is the most interesting one. Does this make sense at all? I mean, the obelisk, first of all, we're looking at 2016. The obelisk was not put there today. The second thing is, there we go. The second thing to consider would be the, well, Regulus is a particularly bright star, obviously it is, but would this make sense for the particular culture that we're looking at? Of course, in this case, with the obelisk, it's slightly different, but let's say we're looking at a Greek temple or a medieval church or a Irish passage grave. We can start to construct or consider this target within that particular context, cultural context. Bring in the historical record, bring in the ethnography, bring in the archaeological record. Does it make sense? You can then also look at other things, like at what particular point of the year is Regulus rising, seen to rise in this alignment? Was that a particularly important time of the year for that particular culture, etc.? I mean, there's all sorts of things one could do then. But this is Stellarium is a quick way of identifying a target. So for instance, let's say that obelisk was put there 2000 BC. We could just put a minus there. So roughly 2000 BC, actually 2000 BC. And we can now look for a target. Looking at the same value of declination, the declination that we measured didn't change, but the stars that are going to be at that declination do change through time. So if we now look again at that particular part of the horizon, and as I scroll through, you will see, did I just miss it? Oh, okay, we'll come back to it. You'll see nothing thus far, nothing thus far, nothing, and then Spica. Okay? These are just two particularly bright stars that happen to align with the obelisk, or have aligned with the obelisk. But this is one way of doing this, and you can then consider whether it was a feasible alignment, whether it was intentional, or whether it might have simply been by chance, completely random.
Can I just illustrate very briefly that this takes quite a lot of other effects to a certain account into account? So if I zoom in more, And we see, so you see a finer grid. So I can really tune this to get it to exactly that moment when it seems to rise here on the horizon. Then we switch on the atmosphere.
It's daytime.
That's daytime.
Change the month.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. Spike.
No, I haven't. This is all method. Yeah.
Yeah.
With atmosphere. So it does recreate the effect of refraction, lifting the stars. That's the little technicality going in there, but it makes it real. So that means that by this case, actually, what might have looked quite good at this point, because we agreed, oh, this is perfect, this is where it should be setting in my landscape at that point. If I switch on the atmosphere,
You actually saw it went up, right? And that's
there we
just-
are. So it's shifted. So it's taking these kinds of details into account. So it's not only a very simple stellarium planetarium program, it actually allows you to import certain kind of aspects as well.
Any questions on this?
So there is no way to put in the declination at a certain year and it goes directly there, or tells you that star what is there at that time.
No.
So this is the only way to do it. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
You need to be immersed in that skyscape. You know, you need to put in the right latitude and longitude at the right time and scroll through the sky, see what they would have seen. And I actually think that's actually better than
Or if
just
you've got
looking
the
at a table.
declination of 11, you can zoom so you get the view of where, like I showed you before, so you can see the entire sky. Maybe switch off the landscape so you can essentially see the celestial sphere, so you can pick out the ring of 11 degrees declination and just go along to what's there. It's another option.
Do you have another example, Fabio, with another location in another?
Sure. I'll change the landscape to start with.
I think there's one with pyramids.
Yeah, but the pyramids just obscure the view.
Well, yeah, brilliant. So you've got different setting as well.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah?
You know, so with stars though, you're not going to be looking at them aligned with the horizon, are you?
Sorry?
With certain stars, I mean, when you're looking at them and they're on the horizon,
Yeah.
in the past, in the ancient past, they wouldn't have been looking at the star on the horizon with visibility. You're not really going to see it below, I mean, at least an altitude of 1 or so, surely.
Yes. Yeah, but that's what Dan was talking about, that if you have the atmosphere on, it recreates that effect. That's why you actually saw Spiker
No,
higher
the other
than
part
it
is, yes, you
was.
would be looking at very faint stars, only the
Yeah,
brightest
there's kind
ones.
of 2 issues though, is it? Yeah. No, is it 1 issue? Yeah.
Not sure what you mean.
The atmosphere changing the position, but the other part is the atmosphere reducing the intensity. So you can
I mean,
find.
the luminosity just isn't there when it's.
Yes, exactly. So I know Stellarium, this is a thing where I still have to get my head around exactly what it is showing from that kind of view. If you zoom in more, it will give you more stars. But that's not necessarily what you're seeing with the naked eye. So it's imitating some kind of telescope effect.
Yeah.
So by that means, you definitely default back to what magnitudes would be visible at which altitudes. So granted, for that visibility spiker, yeah. But if you're looking at, I don't know, a 6 magnitude star in that constellation, well, good luck. No, that won't be there. Stellarium might show you that if you zoom in far enough, because it's assuming that zoom in is you now going away from naked eye to actual telescopic view.
So, I mean, just another example. I don't particularly think this landscape is very helpful for
No,
that.
but I can ask a question
But
about this.
Stonehenge. Go on.
No, I wanted to say about the pyramids. Like we had Bernadette talk about Sirius and pyramids and how, I mean, this looks very wide. So how do we get the effect, the small effect of they build?
This is this landscape I've just pulled up the web.
Yeah.
If you're wanting to actually really work with how the landscape, a structure, is engaging with the sky, you need to go and photograph it from getting the coordinates you want,
You put it in and then you line it up, like the azimuth lines up, so you lock it in. And also you may not want that particular view, it might be from another side or whatever. So you actually make decisions about what sort of landscape you need to create. What are you trying to reproduce? And then you would recreate that visually, get all your azimuth readings so you could lock it into the That's one I did doing Egyptian astronomy, just it's a nice little desert landscape and for a nice visual. But one could not really take, I would not take any readings off of that. That's an artistic graphic.
Even if it might be the right place, the right location, everything is perfect exactly where they are. How they recreated that landscape is in no means good enough to ensure that there aren't any distortions. It's a quick view. It's more to contextualize and give an impression of where you are. So you're in a desert landscape.
So when you put the image, you have to put the coordinates. Sorry, if you put the image, you have to know if you're facing south or north or something.
I can elaborate on that, what you have to set in so it rearranges and does all that. There's a little bit of work that you have to do yourself, but if that's there, then it will.
Because if you take an image, you have to know where the south.
No. That's all something that when you provide the landscape is in there. So it's already at the right height and it's already in the right orientation for the place wherever it might have been taken, which might be there a kilometre away from where you have any interest to be. Think about when you're taking the alignment of the obelisk. If you're in the wrong place, you can measure whatever you want to. It's going to show something, but not what you want.
So, for instance, let's say that you actually captured a landscape that looks more or less like this. It doesn't matter if it's the pyramids or not. And you thought that that particular plateau there, which is the top of one of the pyramids, the third one, the smallest one, would perhaps an important star would rise there. Okay? So you could then now look at it and just let the time scroll by in search of something. Oh, there was something there, but I think it was a planet. Switch off the atmosphere. So we're looking at that.
Using an appropriate time period. Yeah, you've got
yes, minus 2000, yeah. Oh, there was Vega, that's the one I was looking for.
Yeah, this is where soon you get fed up of it and then you go straight away to the date and time window to control it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Then of course you.
Yeah.
And this doesn't show any reason as to why.
However, think about what we did with our landscape in Clifton. We found a place that was important and we wanted to highlight certain aspects like the water feature. So engaging in that site, we then intentionally wandered around to get the water feature to line up with your site. In a way, what you're doing there is trying to pick out a location for a monument that might celebrate the water feature in the context of the skyscape, so you can turn it on its head, depending whatever you want to look at.
Just another point. Then the way you report this on an essay, on a dissertation, however, you very welcome to say you used Stellarium to check for the match between your fieldwork and a particular star. But then what you need to report is you should click on the star and you need to get the RA index on date, not the J2000. That's the declination for the year 2000. But for the actual date you put in this case 2000 BC, not AD. And it's that number then, plus 4119. And you can see that's the line plus 40, that's 45, so it is roughly 41. Compare that with the J2000, which is 38. It's clearly not that one. 38 would be more or less here. So you can always, when in doubt which one to use, you can always double check by comparing the numbers to the grid. And that's what you should report. You need to put that number in the essay. Anything else before we move to landscapes? Bernadette, anything you think we should cover that we haven't?
And maybe just final, I think people are getting tired.
Yeah.
So, landscapes is a big topic.
But I think all I would do is briefly have a look at one of the folders, what is in there, so people can see it's not mythical. And we can have a look at the INI file, which brings in the kind of calibration part that's in there. I mean, there's some publications and a lot of wiki stuff on there that help you to get your foothold in there. It's always best to try it and experiment with it. That's the first thing I would say.
Yeah, because it's, yeah.
I mean, say a few more words on your experience with it while I try to hunt this down.
Oh, I was just going to say that.
Oh, one thing, you might want to document this as an image in your work. So we were talking about, this is all in full screen. Print screen does not grab that at all. So if you go here in the bottom, there's this little icon, which there's full screen mode. If you click on that, it'll give you the window. You can maximize that window, and that's happily screenshotable. Or you can default back to other kind of screen grab technology, but that's the easiest. And then you can grab it and do whatever you want with it.
No, I was just going to say, if you want to create your own landscape, so first of all, you need the photographs. But then you will need some free but specialized software to stitch them together. And then you will need to create the folder that Dan is going to be looking at. And of course, I mean, we're not prepared to do that. I was just taking advantage of the fact that Dan is here and he's an expert at doing that. But he's in no way prepared to show you all of that process. But at least can give you a feel of what it looks like, and it's not mystical, as you said, but it's also not as easy as just pushing a button.
No. So I'm hoping.
Whatever you do, don't press stop or close that window.
No, I will not. I was hoping it was an easier one.
Why don't you open one of the ones that are already installed?
Where are they?
In the Stellarium folder.
Are they in the Stellarium folder?
Yeah, there's a landscape subfolder.
Are they visible in there? Now, my head around this. On my desktop.
Maybe you can help in that, it's your computer.
Do you want to?
Just got a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, there we are. I was just trying
You found it?
No, I just found the PC, so it could be seen.
Quality of
Yes.
Why don't we just type Stellarium?
What do you mean by quality?
Just type
terms
Stellarium.
of, I was thinking, A positions or B things
Stellarium folder.
Yeah.
No, sorry, that's just my picture from.
Yeah, it does. There's lots
I
of
think it's okay if you go into C and then go into Programs, that one.
What
And then
Stellarium does is
Stellarium
he
should
does
be
the best approximation.
around
It's not
somewhere.
but it is
So if you
So
go
we go to the other
the
one.
other Programs
It's-
one.
It's actually quite a complicated topic.
That there is.
One of the people that
Yeah, I know you know where you are.
Shaker,
Yeah, this is where.
Aha.
Yeah.
But again, when you bring back in time, you really don't know what were the conditions back then, and then it's difficult to really nail it down. But you know you're working within certain limits.
Do you want to change the view?
No,
So
it's
as long
there.
as you know those limits,
Because then they
you
can
should
see
be
the
okay.
images easy. If you change the
And
view,
Stellarium gives you a good idea of those limits. That's why.
Yeah.
just go to,
It's
yeah, that's it, extra large. Then they can.
Yeah.
In Stellarium. I actually don't know that. Do you know if the estimate of refraction that Stellarium uses is any way location determined?
No.
Okay.
I would definitely put my money on it. No, because there's
Not
too
even the
complex.
elevation of comes into play, because of course elevation is another big thing.
I think it does.
You think it
I
does?
would say, if anything, that might be the only thing that it takes into account. However,
Yeah.
not temperature and barometer pressure.
Yeah, no.
So all the interesting things, and apart from that, if you're then site-specific viewing over sea and the other side over land, no. Apart from that, it's again for the purpose of the skyscape experience. Going into that depth is, I think, beyond what you should be
Yeah,
pushing.
of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
I
Yeah,
was
don't
just
worry about that.
photographing Mars.
Hmm.
For example, and then checking things on Stellarium, it seems to be quite accurate
Mm.
altitude with what's coming up at.
Oh yeah, on
So,
that level,
and it's
on
the
that
same
level.
with Mercury and Venus, and having done that for a few years, it seems quite accurate. Of
So
where it
even
becomes visible.
just when it's rising, so when it becomes visible,
No,
yeah, okay.
like, you know, you can see it's very faded, and then as it comes into more luminosity,
Yeah,
I mean, it's just seemed quite accurate to me from what I'm checking.
Good.
Okay, so then,
Yeah, sorry, I got distracted.
What's this?
So much of the refraction that it's good enough to distort your images of the moon as well. But anyway, so landscape. So if you download the zip file and you would want to unzip to see what's actually living in there, this is a slightly more complicated thing. So if you ignore everything that is initially up here and just focus on these tiles, what they are is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tiles that are a mosaic of your 360 panorama going around. So whatever you do when you're collecting your landscape, you're going to have a panorama stitching software of your choice that then merges a panorama out of all of your images together and outputs usually a cylindrical projection of a given height and then a defined 360-degree once around view. That has to then be, in a way that we can't discuss here, chopped into just 4, 5, or how many are appropriate canvases. That's one part. The next part is, what do we actually then do to import it into Stellarium to be at the right position? So this is, oh, brilliant. That's good. So this is the data that's in the landscape. Do not think you have to program that. Steal it. Copy, paste, Bob's your uncle. So in that part you change these things at the top just for purposes of what the name is, what this landscape is. These are the key things to be playing around with. So you've got first, you've got a definition how many tiles are making up your landscape. Then you give them names so the program knows where they're located. So they're as a side, they're PNG files. Then you do the same thing in here. You define the same number. So if you've got 8 slides, you've got 8 slides here, and then just copy and paste to ensure that you've got 8. In this case, you can see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This just ensures you're taking the same kind of setup for the imaging for each of these. Now that part you can already now upload it into Stellarium. It will look horrific because it's going to be squashed, shifted, and rotated the wrong way. All of that you can then take into account by using 1, 2, 3 parameters. One will be then, they're all located in here, decor, and then these 4 angles give. Decor angle will give you how much of an angle you're mapping in your panorama. So is it a very tall panorama that is 80 degrees from bottom to top? Or is it very narrow, 10 degrees? That's what you would set in there. Always a good idea to check when you're stretching it, then put it into Stellarium and have a look. Does your rectangular window in the church still look rectangular in the same way, or has it been completely distorted? So you can then tweak to make sure it's stretched properly. The next part is, if you got that right, is to ensure wherever you've got the horizon or whatever altitude you've measured as a reference, that is brought to the right height. That's what will be prolonged into decor angle shift. That ensures that your landscape that is now stretched to the right height is now positioned at the right location. So essentially that your panorama band that is the right thickness is now stretching either quite low, exactly on your on your 0 horizon, or a little bit higher, depending on how you set your landscape. The next part you can think is then already making sure north is north and south is south. That would be decor angle rotate, altering that to ensure that the reference point you've taken, the tip of the distant chimney or the peak of the pyramid, is rotated where it should be. Wow. At that point, I think the brief intro gives it. That's it.
Yeah, and what I do with mine is I'll copy a whole folder.
Yeah, oh yes, yeah.
A whole folder, take this, rename it, and then you put your images in, and I'll even call them the same name, or I'll and then you quickly figure out these three measurements need
Yeah.
to be adjusted.
Try never, ever,
You
ever
don't
to try
drink
to
wine
make
while
sense.
you're doing
Yeah.
it, okay?
Yeah. But never try to figure out what they should be. Is my best
No,
tip.
you've got to do it.
Just, it looks like it's 10 degrees off, let's increase it by 10. Oh, it's off, the wrong direction, do it the other way. This is what is in this folder, or in this file, in this landscape ini. Landscape.ini. That's in the same folder, yeah.
Every landscape has one of those in it, it's an ini file. That's why you just copy a folder,
Ini.
rename it, and then you start hacking that folder.
So we'll call landscape.ini.
So it's in the Stellarium folder and then landscapes, and then you have one folder for each of the landscapes.
Or you download wherever you've got the zip file from, and that's normally hidden inside there. One aspect that you can notice here, if I just open this PNG and zoom in, it's got the land in there and it has no sky, because one part is when you chop this panorama into its pieces, you remove the sky.
You quickly learn what you need to do.
Yeah. Again, in a software of your choice.
So I can download software to break up the panorama photograph like this that will remove the sky.
I use AutoStitch, which stitches everything together, which is free. Then I use GIMP, which allows you to edit things, which is free as well.
Okay.
So therefore you pay $0 to have that experience. Okay.
Okay. Thank you,
Thank you,
Dan. Thank you. Thank you, Fabio. Now we have recorded this entire session with the screen, and I will put it up somewhere because in the cloud, because I think it's something that other students might want to look at as well, but to revisit. We're all a little bit tired. It's been a long and vigorous day, but tonight when you see the stars, recognise you can always